Complete audio summary of Murder in the Orient Express by Agatha Christie. First published January 1, 1934. Warning, spoilers ahead. Read to you at Book Nook. Hercule Poirot, a meticulous and brilliant Belgian detective, had just concluded a case in Syria and was looking forward to a brief respite in Istanbul. His plans were disrupted by an urgent telegram instructing him to return to London immediately. Determined to obey the call, Poirot made arrangements to travel on the luxurious Orient Express, a train known for its opulence and reputation as a mode of travel for the elite. Arriving at the station, he was met by his old friend Monsieur Bouc, the director of the train company, who ensured Poirot secured a berth despite the train being unusually crowded for the time of year. As the train departed Istanbul and began its journey across Europe, Poirot observed the eclectic mix of passengers. Among them was Samuel Ratchet, an American businessman whose demeanor was as unsettling as it was arrogant. Ratchet approached Poirot with a request to serve as his private detective, revealing that he had been receiving threatening letters and feared for his life. Ratchet offered Poirot a significant fee for protection, but the detective, repulsed by the man's personality and suspicious of his character, declined, remarking that he did not like Ratchet's face. The train sped onward, carrying its diverse passengers through scenic European landscapes. Poirot noted the interactions and personalities of those aboard, cataloging details in his observant manner. The journey seemed smooth until, during the night, a sudden stop occurred. Heavy snowfall had blocked the tracks in Yugoslavia, leaving the train stranded in the middle of nowhere. The abrupt halt added an air of tension to the journey, and the passengers seemed uneasy. That night, Poirot's sleep was disturbed by unusual noises emanating from Ratchet's compartment, which was next to his own. He heard a cry, followed by muffled voices, and then silence. A bell summoned the conductor, Pierre Michel, who confirmed all seemed in order when checked. Poirot also glimpsed a woman in a red kimono walking hurriedly down the corridor, but he dismissed it at the time as unimportant and returned to sleep. The following morning, Poirot awoke to a grim discovery: Ratchet was dead. The American had been brutally murdered in his locked compartment, stabbed 12 times. The injuries varied greatly, some deep and forceful, others shallow and hesitant, suggesting a strange and conflicting array of emotions or, perhaps, the involvement of multiple individuals. The locked door initially posed a puzzle, but it was soon revealed that Ratchet's door had been bolted from the inside, and the train's immobilization due to the snowstorm ensured that the murderer remained on board. Monsieur Bouc and Dr. Constantine, the train's doctor, turned to Poirot to lead the investigation. As they examined the crime scene, several pieces of evidence came to light. A pocket watch in Ratchet's possession had stopped at 1:15 a.m., presumably marking the time of death. A monogrammed handkerchief bearing the letter H was found near the body, alongside a pipe cleaner that seemed out of place in Ratchet's belongings. A partially burned letter revealed an important clue: Ratchet's true identity was Christie, a notorious criminal responsible for the kidnapping and murder of Daisy Armstrong, a young girl whose tragic death had shocked the world. The Armstrong family, devastated by the loss, had suffered a chain of tragedies following the crime. Daisy's mother died in childbirth due to the shock, and her father, Colonel Armstrong, took his own life in despair. Public outrage at the time had been immense, but Christie had managed to evade justice due to his wealth and influence. As Poirot pieced together the evidence, he noted the peculiar staging of the crime scene. An open window in Ratchet's compartment seemed to suggest that the murderer had fled, but this was clearly a ruse, as the snow outside remained undisturbed. The varying depths and angles of the stab wounds also presented a strange anomaly, hinting at more than one person's involvement. Poirot's sharp mind began to formulate theories, even as he awaited further details from the passengers and crew. The conductor, Pierre Michel, was among the first to provide testimony. He confirmed that all seemed normal during his rounds, though he admitted to being summoned by a bell from Ratchet's compartment at one point. Michel also claimed that no unauthorized individuals could have boarded or left the train due to the snowstorm. His alibi appeared solid, yet Poirot remained cautious, knowing that appearances could be deceiving. Meanwhile, the passengers were abuzz with speculation and unease. Some reported hearing odd noises or seeing suspicious activity during the night. A few mentioned spotting a figure in a conductor's uniform wandering the corridor, raising the possibility of a disguise. Poirot listened attentively, noting inconsistencies and peculiarities in their accounts. As Poirot prepared to interview the passengers systematically, he took stock of their profiles and potential motives. Among them were an elderly Russian princess with a formidable demeanor, a talkative American matron, a reserved Swedish missionary, an Italian businessman, an English governess, a colonel returning to Britain, and a German maid in service to the princess. Each had their own story and background, yet Poirot could sense that beneath their surface exteriors lay secrets waiting to be uncovered. Poirot's meticulous approach to the investigation, coupled with the mounting tension aboard the train, created an air of suspense. The clues seemed to point in multiple directions, and Poirot knew that unraveling the mystery would require uncovering hidden connections among the passengers and the victim. With the train still immobilized by snow, the detective understood that the truth was contained within the confines of the Orient Express, and it was only a matter of time before he brought it to light. As Hercule Poirot begins his systematic investigation into the murder of Samuel Ratchet, the atmosphere aboard the train grows tense. The passengers, now aware that a killer is among them, react in various ways, some with apprehension, others with defensiveness, and a few with indifference. Poirot meticulously interviews each individual, piecing together their accounts of the night and their possible connections to the victim. Poirot starts with Hector McQueen, Ratchet's secretary. McQueen, a young and eager American, admits he despised his employer. He confesses that he discovered Ratchet's true identity as Cassetti and had a personal grudge against him due to the Armstrong case, which his own family had followed closely. Despite his animosity, McQueen insists he had no hand in the murder. Poirot notes his genuine anger toward Cassetti but finds no direct evidence linking him to the crime. Next, the elderly and talkative Mrs. Hubbard demands attention. She insists that someone was in her compartment during the night, claiming she distinctly felt a presence and even found a button from a conductor's uniform lying on her floor. Mrs. Hubbard's testimony is dramatic and highly detailed, but Poirot wonders if her penchant for exaggeration might cloud her account. Poirot interviews the quiet and reserved Swedish missionary, Greta Olsen, who recounts hearing nothing unusual. However, she seems nervous and on edge, which Poirot attributes to her timid nature. Similarly, Hildegard Schmidt, the princess's maid, recounts seeing a man in a conductor's uniform during the night. Her description matches that of other witnesses who claim to have seen a small, dark man moving through the train. Colonel Arbuthnot, the stern and composed Englishman, presents himself as straightforward. He admits he had a late-night conversation with McQueen in the smoking car but insists he knows nothing about the murder. Poirot senses Arbuthnot's rigidity but also picks up on subtle hints of protectiveness toward Mary Debenham, the young governess traveling on the train. Mary Debenham, in turn, offers a calm and measured account of her movements. Poirot recalls overhearing a conversation between her and Arbuthnot during the earlier part of the journey, where she seemed to express frustration about delays. Her composed demeanor intrigues Poirot, and he wonders if she might be hiding something beneath her cool exterior. The enigmatic Count and Countess Andrenii, a glamorous and aristocratic couple, prove more challenging. The Countess seems nervous during her interview, while the Count remains protective and somewhat evasive. Poirot notices that the Countess's passport has a smudge on it, which obscures part of her name. This detail, coupled with her demeanor, raises Poirot's suspicions. Poirot continues with the brash and outspoken American businessman Cyrus Hardman. Hardman reveals that he is actually a private detective hired by Ratchet to protect him. Hardman claims that Ratchet feared for his life and had received anonymous threats, but despite his presence, he was unable to prevent the murder. Poirot scrutinizes Hardman's account and finds it plausible, though not without gaps. The Italian passenger, Antonio Foscarelli, is jovial and larger than life. A car salesman by trade, Foscarelli insists he had no reason to harm Ratchet and that he spent the night in his compartment. Despite his affable nature, Poirot senses that Foscarelli is holding something back. Pierre Michel, the conductor of the train, appears trustworthy and professional. He recounts his actions during the night, maintaining that he followed his routine and heard nothing unusual beyond the bell ringing in Ratchet's compartment. However, Poirot notes the possibility of a disguise, as several witnesses described seeing a man in a conductor's uniform moving through the train at odd hours. As Poirot pieces together the accounts, he discovers inconsistencies and connections. The burned letter fragment in Ratchet's compartment reveals ties to the Armstrong case, and Poirot begins to suspect that multiple passengers may have links to the tragedy. The handkerchief with the initial H and the pipe cleaner add further intrigue, hinting at individuals with varied habits and personalities. Poirot methodically reconstructs the timeline of events. Ratchet was alive and active shortly before the presumed time of death, as indicated by his interactions with the conductor. Witnesses' accounts place various individuals near Ratchet's compartment, though the descriptions are often vague or contradictory. Poirot also considers the possibility that the open window in Ratchet's compartment was a deliberate attempt to mislead the investigation. One by one, Poirot revisits the passengers' statements, comparing their alibis and probing their stories for weaknesses. He observes that many of them seem to have a vested interest in diverting attention or protecting someone else. Small details, such as Mary Debenham's calm demeanor or the smudge on the Countess's passport, take on greater significance as the web of connections becomes clearer. The tension aboard the train reaches a boiling point as Poirot narrows down his list of suspects. He recognizes that the murder was not a simple crime of opportunity but a carefully orchestrated act. The presence of multiple stab wounds, some strong and others weak, suggests the involvement of more than one person, each with a different level of resolve or emotional investment. Poirot's sharp intellect and methodical approach begin to unravel the truth hidden within the passengers' accounts. He identifies patterns and inconsistencies, recognizing that the key to solving the murder lies in understanding the motivations and connections of those aboard the train. As the investigation progresses, Poirot prepares to confront the passengers with his findings, knowing that the answers lie just beneath the surface. Hercule Poirot, having meticulously gathered all the evidence and testimonies, begins to piece together the puzzle of Samuel Ratchet's murder. He assembles the passengers in the dining car, where he presents his findings with characteristic precision and clarity. The atmosphere is charged with tension as the detective prepares to unveil the truth, aware that his revelations will be both shocking and far-reaching. Poirot begins by recounting the clues and discrepancies he has uncovered during his investigation. He highlights the key evidence, the letter linking Ratchet to the Armstrong case, the varying depths and angles of the stab wounds, the mysterious figure in a conductor's uniform, and the diverse array of personal items found in the passengers' compartments. Each piece of evidence, Poirot explains, contributes to a larger and more intricate narrative. Poirot notes that each piece of evidence was deliberately planted to mislead him or create confusion, yet it all converges to point to a single, unified truth. Then, Poirot explains that Samuel Ratchet was, in fact, Cassetti, a notorious gangster who had orchestrated the kidnapping and murder of 3-year-old Daisy Armstrong. Cassetti's crime led to a chain of devastating events. Daisy's death shattered her family, causing her pregnant mother to die of shock and her father to take his own life. A servant in the Armstrong household was falsely accused and, in her despair, also died by suicide. Despite overwhelming evidence of his guilt, Cassetti used his wealth and influence to escape justice, fleeing America and hiding under an assumed identity. After this, Poirot turns his attention to the passengers' connections to the Armstrong family. He reveals that many of them have ties to the tragedy, either directly or indirectly. This revelation is staggering, as it transforms what initially appeared to be a random crime into a meticulously planned act of vengeance. Countess Helena Andrenii is Daisy Armstrong's aunt, the younger sister of Sonia Armstrong. Her aristocratic demeanor and altered passport were attempts to conceal her identity. Linda Arden, traveling as Mrs. Hubbard, is revealed to be a famous actress and Daisy's grandmother. She masterminded the plot, using her theatrical skills to stage the crime and ensure its execution. Mary Debenham, the governess, was Daisy's tutor and deeply attached to the child. Her calm and collected exterior masked her emotional involvement. Colonel Arbuthnot was a close friend of Colonel Armstrong and harbored a profound sense of loyalty and justice. Greta Olsen, the Swedish missionary, was Daisy's nurse, and her guilt over failing to protect the child motivated her participation. Antonio Foscarelli, the Italian businessman, was the family's chauffeur. Hildegard Schmidt, the princess's maid, was the Armstrongs' cook. Princess Dragomirov, a commanding presence on the train, was a close friend of the Armstrong family and godmother to Sonia Armstrong. Cyrus Hardman, the private detective, had been romantically involved with the falsely accused maid and sought vengeance for her tragic death. Pierre Michel, the train conductor, was the father of the maid who had been driven to suicide. Even minor characters, such as McQueen, Ratchet's secretary, and Masterman, his valet, had personal connections to the Armstrong case. McQueen's father had been the Armstrongs' attorney, while Masterman had served as Colonel Armstrong's Batman during the war. Poirot proceeds to lay out the intricate plan that the passengers had devised. Each of them had a hand in the murder, taking turns to stab Cassetti in a symbolic act of collective justice. The varying strength and depth of the wounds reflected their individual emotions, some struck with anger and determination, while others, overcome by hesitation or fear, delivered weaker blows. The plan was carefully coordinated to ensure that no single person could be definitively identified as the killer, creating a web of shared responsibility. Poirot presents two possible solutions to the case. The first is a straightforward but implausible theory: an unknown outsider boarded the train, committed the murder, and fled undetected. The second, more complex and damning theory is that all the passengers, acting as a jury, conspired to execute Cassetti as retribution for his crimes. Poirot asserts that the evidence overwhelmingly supports the second conclusion. Monsieur Bouc and Dr. Constantine, Poirot's companions in the investigation, are left to decide which solution to present to the authorities. Bouc, sympathetic to the passengers' motives and the moral weight of their actions, leans toward suppressing the truth. He acknowledges that justice, in this extraordinary case, was served outside the bounds of law. As Poirot concludes his presentation, the passengers sit in stunned silence, their collective guilt laid bare. Linda Arden steps forward as the de facto leader of the group, acknowledging their actions and explaining the pain and grief that had driven them to commit the crime. She expresses their belief that Cassetti's death was the only way to achieve justice for Daisy Armstrong and her family. Poirot, satisfied with his work, steps back and leaves the decision in the hands of Bouc and Constantine. The train, still stranded in the snow, seems momentarily suspended in time, a liminal space where the passengers confront the weight of their actions and the moral complexities of justice. Poirot, ever the keen observer of human nature, reflects on the case as an extraordinary example of both collective vengeance and the enduring impact of grief and loss. In the end, the authorities are presented with the simpler, fabricated explanation, allowing the passengers to go free. The train resumes its journey, and the passengers return to their lives, forever changed by the events aboard the Orient Express. Poirot, having once again demonstrated his unmatched brilliance, departs with a quiet understanding of the profound and tragic humanity at the heart of the case. The end. I hope you have enjoyed this summary. If you liked it, please subscribe so I can keep uploading even more books. Also, giving me a like helps a lot. I will probably be doing a summary of the rest of the series, but if you would like me to summarize any specific book, please write me it in the comments.